Hello everyone. Welcome back. Um in the theme of something always going wrong 30 seconds before I start, I just spilled a glass of water over my keyboard. It's a pretty keyboard, but now it's wet. Anyway, how is everyone doing? How is the sound? Hello Twitch, hello YouTube. Um Hello everyone in various chats combined. Um Good stuff. It sounds like the sound is good. Um, my keyboard seems to still be working. I guess water's just fine. Um, yeah, we'll see. We got some stuff to talk about this week, but let's see how everyone in chat's doing first. Has anyone had anything good happen this week, or terrible even? Um, I guess some before we get onto the new stuff, I went to the European International Pokemon Championships in London over the weekend, which is pretty fun. They have it's like the second highest level. There's like the World Championships, obviously is the top one. This is the next one down. There's a European, there's a North American, and there's a Latin American international championships. And there's also there used to be a Australasia Oceania one, but that stopped for some reason. And then Japan and some countries in that area have their own system. Anyway, it has Pokemon cards, the game on the Switch, Pokemon Go, and Pokemon Unite, all under one like absolutely ginormous room. And there's like thousands and thousands of people there. There's all like stalls and activities and people in Pokemon costumes, and it was really fun. I did really bad in the main event. Like really bad, the worst I've done in an event in ages, which is a bit disappointing. But everyone I met was really nice. I had a really fun time. I had hung out with loads of my friends, made some new friends. It was just a really good break from the horror of reality, and I think that that's quite important to do. Um, but yeah, it was a fun time. Just seeing what everyone else is saying here. So, someone Thomas Donald Jacobs says finally got my podcast up and running. That's good. Finishing new art piece. Yeah, that is great. I don't do enough art stuff in my life. I haven't played enough guitar recently. Maud says, I want you to know that because of you, I have to learn to style my hair and decide whether or not to get bangs. Is that my fault, is it? I think everyone should have nice hair. Like, there's no, or at least make some decisions about what's going on in your head. Even if you choose to have no hair, or you don't get a choice and you have no hair, just make your decisions and don't just let it turn into a like crow's nest, unless that's the style you want to go for. I mean, gender critical activist Suzanne Moore has made having terrible hair her like brand, and that's clearly working for her. So why not? A cat brought a rat into my house. Oh no, he was so proud. Yeah, that's not great. Hopefully, there's one of those things where it's like, well, hopefully the rat was fine, but then there's a rat in your house, and rats are when they're brought into a house, they're usually terrified and in defense mode, and so they're quite hard to get back outside. I know we once had my parents' cats once brought a rat in, and it was a challenge. Luckily, Poppy hasn't ever brought a rat in. I mean, she's barely even bigger than a rat, so that probably wouldn't end well for her if she tried. Oh, we've got a super chat here for very kind, $5 from Rick Nelson. For Browners, congratulations. I might have missed that. If I don't know what that is, I'm sorry. Hannah saying rats are terrific pets, but a wild one in the house is not good. Yeah, I mean that's probably true for cats too. Like they're great pets, but you wouldn't want a wild one in your house. That would be probably a bloody experience. Um, Someone saying here, oh, I got an anti-trans hate group taken off Facebook by threatening them with Belgian anti-hate speech laws. That was good too. I'm amazed that that worked. I thought Facebook was all in on LGBT hatred now, but maybe in Belgium you have stricter regulations. There's nothing like that would ever happen in the UK. My goodness. But yeah, it's Facebook is. I deleted all my Meta stuff apart from WhatsApp because it's so all-encompassing. You just can't delete WhatsApp, or I've not been able to. But I've got rid of Facebook and I got rid of Instagram because Instagram's rubbish anyway. And I wasn't even using Facebook. It was quite easy. Like, it was a protest for me. I did delete. Sorry, I'm just mopping up some water that's dribbling out my keyboard. I did delete all my Meta stuff as a protest. But also it was quite easy because it's rubbish and I don't really use it. I mean, I hadn't looked at Facebook timeline in like literally years, like 3-4 years. And I was using Facebook Messenger sometimes to message like the 4 people I didn't have on WhatsApp. And to get weird, grim messages from people. Yeah, so it's quite easy. Delete. Good on you for also deleting your WhatsApp. That's a challenge beyond. But in 2012, it would have been impossible for me to delete Facebook. So now here we are. It was very easy. I was surprised Sandwich Man, the ex-deputy prime minister, was a member of Meta. I'm not sure what that means, but I'm pretty sure that Nick Clegg, who used to be the head of the Liberal Democrats, works for Meta now. Works for Facebook. Turns out if you live outside the US, you can file a legal complaint to the Facebook Internal Review. If you can cite the exact laws and the exact examples, threaten them with legal enforcement, they'll do it. Okay, that's interesting. Worth noting, I guess, for anyone who encounters Nazis on Facebook and wants to slow them down 15 seconds. Is anybody still on Twitter? Sometimes you have to go on Twitter. We're actually going to look at some stuff from Twitter today from some Nazi. Anyway, maybe we should get on to it. So this week has been it's been very stressful for me in terms of trans rights stuff. Not because of something that's personally happened to me, but because we're watching like my personal worst fears play out in the USA right now, or my like line in the sand. And I'm not saying that it's worse for me or that this is the thing everyone should be worried about the most, but there are some things that worry some people and some things that worry other people. And the things that are worrying me are happening. And we're not going to talk about that first because I'm going to build up to it because I don't really want to dive straight in first on it. So I thought first we could start with some, like, I'm not going to say good news, positive news, encouraging news. And then we're going to do some science. And then we'll deal with the horror. And then we'll do some more horror. And then maybe we'll have a positive discussion about what to do next and what we can do. But yeah, so the first thing, I don't know if everyone saw this. I wanted to talk about this. So, see if I can get this so everyone can see it. So, this was a case in the UK. There are so many of these cases going on at the moment now. I know that we've only just recently been commenting on some other cases, small scale employment tribunals and all this kind of stuff, and when they go in the favor of the gender criticals or when they really care about them, then there's like wall-to-wall media coverage, but for this there wasn't that much coverage. So here we have from the Art newspaper. I was also just looking at the archive of the Telegraph here. Maybe this is the best one to start with. Arts Council diversity manager who compared gender critical views to racism in line for payment. Afrina Islam Wright was dismissed following comments she made about LGB Alliance. So, if you don't know who LGB Alliance are, they are an anti-trans hate group in the UK who just very openly campaigns to remove human rights that trans people have in the UK. And a while ago, a couple of years ago, they were given a grant. I think it does say that here in this article. But they were given a grant by the Arts Council, and people were kind of horrified, like, how the hell did this happen? Why are you giving it to these, like, horrible people who aren't going to do anything with the money apart from campaigning against human rights? And so there was a big petition against it, and this lady was involved in some way and ended up getting let go from her job, and has just won in courts. And the court said that was unfair dismissal. So it says here, Arts Council diversity manager investigated after she compared gender critical beliefs to racism as on a payout for unfair dismissal. She became upset after a grant was awarded. I mean, they always just try and frame it in the way where, like, the most disgusting attacks on people's human rights, trans people's human rights, are just people getting upset. But then when suddenly a gender critical person gets described exactly how they are, all of a sudden it's like the end of the world and really serious. Anyway, they do have her comments here. She said she would feel terrified if co-workers were making openly racist statements and can't imagine what trans colleagues were going through when they were finding out about the grant. I think we've got the actual quote in this article. Oh, and also a better summary here. Obviously, the Telegraph's trash. I just wanted to see the angle they were taking on it. So it says here, she was the subject of internal investigation after she left comments on a petition opposing the approval of a £9,000 grant to LGB Alliance, a campaign group whose policy on trans issues opposes that of LGBT charity Stonewall. And, like, to be clear, LGB Alliance are signatures, or how do you say that? Signatories? I don't know. They have signed the WDI Declaration, which is a public gender critical, like, pledge of allegiance, which says that they basically very clearly list out that they want to remove all trans people's rights. They don't want us to have access to healthcare. They don't want us to be taught about in schools. They don't want us to be able to be teachers. They don't want us to do anything. Like, every single thing. They want to repeal the Gender Recognition Act. They want to remove us from the Equality Act. Absolutely everything. And LGB Alliance have very clearly committed to that. Everything they've ever done has been explicitly anti-trans. They constantly have all these big anti-trans speakers. There's absolutely no room for, like, confusion about what's going on here. It's just an anti-trans group. And she said, if I came to work one day and attended a drop-in session where staff members were making openly racist statements and asking ACE what protection would be offered to them as a race-critical staff member, I would feel terrified. She was worried that the gender-critical staff members were making the funding decisions, and she wrote, I can't imagine what my trans and non-binary colleagues are feeling right now. I'm very concerned that gender-critical staff members are making the funded decisions and believe it is of the utmost importance that trans awareness training is delivered, and also training about a public sector equality duty. It shouldn't be taken as a given that everyone comes to work with no discriminatory views. We can't train people out of being transphobic, but we can make it clear that we won't tolerate transphobia by not tolerating it. So these are, like, super mild, super mild comments. I mean, it is completely reasonable to compare gender critical to racism. I mean, what's the difference? Racism is an irrational prejudice of people based on their race. Gender critical is an irrational prejudice of people based on whether they're trans or not. They all make the same arguments. You know, they work together all the time. I mean, they're even calling themselves sex realists now, which is, like, directly referencing race realist, which is a term for someone who is a racist and who pretends that they're actually racist because of science. And gender criticals like LGB Alliance are openly calling to remove all of our human rights and remove us from public life, so, which is exactly what racists want for people of races they don't like. I'm not saying racism and transphobia are identical. They obviously have their own histories and their own quirks and their own specifics. But in terms of it being a type of prejudice, I mean, very openly is. Gender critical is just unambiguously just a form of irrational prejudice and hatred against a group of people. So it's completely reasonable to compare that. And saying we shouldn't, why are gender critical people making fun decisions for like an art council England? Insane. And we can't train people out of being transphobic, but we can make it clear we don't tolerate transphobia. I mean, that's so mild. Calling for diversity training, like, yes, okay, that's like normal. So no wonder she won this this tribunal. It would be absolutely crazy if she didn't. There was an extra thing here. Yeah, so just absolutely crazy. Like, we were just comparing here how they're like, oh, she became upset after they got a grant. Oh, she's so upset, like trying to minimize her experience. And then here we have the tribunal in Manchester heard that she had created a hostile environment for colleagues with different views and that she had equated gender critical beliefs to racism. A hostile environment. Oh no, you're making a hostile environment for the racists. Oh, what a shame. Good. Like, all environments should be hostile to irrational prejudice and bigotry. Environments should be hostile towards people who are trying to remove other people's human rights, because that is horrific. So, like, what are you talking about? Just absolutely crazy. That they would just try and, oh, where was me? Oh no, all I wanted to do was ruin the lives of every trans person in the country, and now someone's pushing back against me, and it's making things so hostile for me. Ugh. Yeah, just crazy. And horrible that this is a position that so many people seem to think is reasonable. Islam Right will now receive a significant payout from the council, the value which we decided later. Good, because this just unreal that they let her go for this, for just being concerned about trans people and being like, why the hell is this anti-trans group, which is going to do nothing with this money apart from lobby to get human rights removed, what are they going to do with £9,000? Who made this decision? It doesn't seem like anyone working here supported it. Like, you know, she's the diversity manager. Surely she should have been like consulted in this. But yeah, so just ridiculous. And we now have a ruling saying that it is okay to compare gender critical to racism. Basically, what we're seeing more and more is just that the Mayor Forstater ruling, which happened quite a long time ago now, was just wrong. It was just completely ridiculous ruling. And all I can see is that it was a combination of very good lawyers on the side of the gender criticals, or lawyers using arguments that managed to sneak under the radar, and or a bad judge, and or a bad defense from the people pushing back against gender critical. The fact that they ruled that gender critical is acceptable in a democratic society, and then said gender critical is just the belief that sex is binary and immutable, it's just wrong. I mean, if you believe sex is binary and immutable or you don't, who cares? No one cares if you're like a science denier. Like, oh, if you believe that the moon is flat or whatever, like, I don't actually care. It doesn't affect me if you just have some stupid anti-science belief. But if you're then also harassing people, like if you're harassing NASA employees on the internet and you're calling to remove NASA employees' human rights and you're using slurs for them and you're campaigning, donating loads of money to take away the human rights, suddenly that is an issue and it doesn't matter what you believe. And that's exactly what gender critical is. Gender critical isn't just this single belief that souls have a sex or whatever. It's a movement trying to take away rights from people. And we're seeing it in action in the USA right now, where they are actually taking away rights from people. They're doing everything that the WDI Declaration states. For example, which we will cover later, removing trans people's passports. But that shouldn't be tolerated in a democratic society. It's evil. It's immoral. It's irrational, and it is the same as like racism or homophobia or sexism. So I just think we need more rulings like this that slowly chip away at this terrible Mayor for Stater ruling, to realize that that ruling is just rubbish. Gender critical isn't compatible with respect in a democratic society because they are defined by their complete lack of respect for trans people and for wanting to remove trans people from public life. So, very frustrating context here. Always, whenever we talk about trans rights, it's always frustrating because the fact we have to have this conversation at all is frustrating. But it is kind of positive news. So we'll talk about a sciencey thing just because we were just talking about gender critical and what it actually is. So let me just zoom in so we can see better and put it in a more sensible place. So next thing we're going to talk about, I saw this on my timeline just going past, and it's just one of those things that I always would have found interesting when I was younger, before having to do trans politics or whatever. And it's just an article saying, why do women live longer than men? By understanding the reasons, scientists hope to help both sexes age better. And this is just kind of interesting. This isn't anything directly to do with trans people, but it's just an example of where when you do science and it's not near Republican, gender critical bigotry and ideology where they're trying to deny the reality of science, then you come up with interesting results. But as soon as you start overlaying what they believe on top of them, the results make absolutely no sense at all. So they're saying here that women outlive men by something of a long shot. In the United States, women have a life expectancy of 80 compared to around 75 for men. And it's true regardless of where women live, how much money they make, and many other factors. And it's even true for most other mammals. So that's one of the things we're like, biology must be involved in this some way. Oh, very likely it is, especially when it's like across other animals, across demographics, across geography. And if you're a gender critical person or a Trump MAGA person, then you'll be like, well, that's because there are males and there are females, and that's it. And you cannot change that. And one of them just lives longer than the other one. That's it. That's just part of it. It's innate. End of question. Done. But if you're a scientist or someone who's remotely actually interested in biology, you might be like, well, why is this? Like, what aspects of women and men contribute to this? And in order to do that, you have to break up sex into multiple parts and look at all of them, because it's not just sex is just this one property and femaleness causes you to live longer. It's got lots of things inside it. So if we look, they were breaking it up here. There was, let's see if I can find it. Talking about chromosomes here somewhere. The find isn't working. Oh, okay, there we go. So, a growing body of research suggests that the XX set of female sex chromosomes, which along with other chromosomes carry our DNA, may impact longevity, though it's not clear exactly how. For example, a 2018 study looked at genetically manipulated mice with different combinations of sex chromosomes and reproductive organs. Right, so already what they've done here is break sex into some of its components and mix and match them around to see which ones are actually contributing to longevity and which ones aren't, or to get some idea. So they have, it says here, those with 2 X chromosomes and ovaries lived the longest, followed by mice with 2 X chromosomes and testes. Mice with XY chromosomes had shorter lifespans. So that suggests here that there's at least 2 factors in here. It looking only at this data and not controlling for other things, that having a second X chromosome or maybe just having a Y chromosome has some impact on longevity, and also does which gonads you have. And this is exactly what we mean when we're talking about sex not being binary. If sex was binary, then it would just be, oh, males or females do this or this, and that's it. But chromosomes and gonads, which are both parts of sex, sex is the whole encompassing concept here, which includes chromosomes, gonads, genitals, hormones, all these other kinds of things. Each one of these may or may not affect longevity in different ways. And so that means when you have atypical combinations of these, they will affect longevity in different ways. And it's not just longevity here, but this is just one example of something which is affected differently by different sex characteristics. So saying here that there's something about the second X chromosome that's protecting the mice from dying in earlier life, even if they had testes. Or if there was something on the second X chromosome that was in some way a sprinkle of the fountain of youth. Okay, that's a bit of a hyperbolic claim. But they were also talking about hormones here. Researchers are investigating the role of sex hormones in longevity and are especially interested in the effect they have on the immune system. There's decent data showing that at least before menopause, the female immune system tends to be better, more on it, and better able to mount responses. In general, males tend to do a lot worse in response to infection, which in turn could shorten their lifespans. They're also more likely than women to die of sepsis. One 2017 analysis found that women who experienced menopause later in life, over age 50, lived longer than those who experienced it earlier. When estrogen levels drop, such as during menopause, women's immune systems can seem to weaken, and women tend to catch up to or surpass men in terms of developing diseases that were less common before menopause. So, this is now showing that another aspect of sex, so we've seen that chromosomes and gonads both contribute to longevity in some way, and now also hormones do too, and likely for different reasons. Though this is just a summary article, we'd have to go into the science, and we probably don't know all the details of this yet. But then you might say, well, just because you can change all these different things, it doesn't mean sex isn't binary. A really good example of this is trans people, right? So there are some people who have all of the typical things for men. When you think of a typical cis man or just a typical man, they will have a bunch of sex characteristics. And when you think of a typical woman, they will have another bunch of sex characteristics. Intersex people and trans people can have almost any combination of these characteristics. And so some of the, and if each one of these characteristics has a different effect on longevity or a whole number of other things, you can't just say, oh, well, you are male, therefore you fit into this box, or you are female, so you fit into this box. Because it's made up of all these different sex characteristics, and they all contribute in their different way, and they'll all add up and constructively and deconstructively and create more than one category. And you can't make just one prediction based on one of these things. You can't just say, oh, you have a Y chromosome, therefore you're, the group, you belong to this group of people who are likely to live a shorter amount of time, when it might be that hormones and gonads and all other kinds of things contribute in a way, larger way, have a much bigger impact on longevity or whichever thing you're looking at than the chromosomes might do. And this is a really good example here. Like, it seems so directly that having your immune response is related to the estrogen level. And what do most trans people do? They change their hormone levels. My hormone levels are the same as a typical cis woman of my age, and that's true for a lot of trans women, most trans women. And I know that trans men often have typical hormone levels for cis men their age too. And in fact, I have control over it because I don't produce my own estrogen because I don't have ovaries. So I take HRT, but also some cis women take HRT, and we're seeing that their immune systems drop off after menopause. So it'd be one of the things that you could choose to take HRT for longer as a cis woman or a trans woman, and know that maybe your immune system would be positively affected. There's a whole number of other things that affects, like it can affect cancer rates and it can affect general well-being. And these are all things to take into account. But this is just like one aspect of sex, hormones, affects a whole bunch of stuff in your life. And then another aspect of sex, gonads, affects another whole bunch of stuff in your life. And there are trans women who have testes, and there are trans women who don't. And there are intersex women who even have testes. There are intersex women who don't have any gonads, and there are some with ovaries. And so we have all these big, like, huge number of possible combinations of sex characteristics. And that's what sex is. It's the combination of all of these things. And so if we want to make a prediction about the longevity someone has, or which diseases they might get, or how their body might respond to certain medications, or so many different things, we can't just look at a single letter on your birth certificate, M or F. We have to look at everything that makes up sex. If we want to make the best prediction, we have to know what chromosomes you have, we have to know what gonads you have, we have to know what hormone levels you have, everything. And that's why it's ridiculous to treat sex as a binary. And just linking this in to something I saw going past on Blue Sky, there's this guy called Charles Arthur who I think does or did work for The Guardian. Before I came out, we used to interact on Twitter a few times. He probably doesn't remember that. But he has since come out as gender critical, and he's just one of these clearly gender critical extremists who pretends to be polite and reasonable, but is definitely not. And it's constantly coming out with all these ridiculous gender critical scenarios. So he says, define sex in a way that is scientifically useful. It's a very vague demand, but we can do that to any sensible thing. We'll come back to that particular phrase here. But define sex in a way that is scientifically useful so that we can determine the sex of a person who is in a coma and arrives in hospital. Explain what you mean by sex not being binary and how it affects the reproduction of humans. Go ahead, try and contribute rather than sniping, he says in a very snipey way, not contributing to anything. So the first response to this might be, why the fuck do you need to know the sex of someone in a coma? That's a bit weird. But actually, you can. I mean, it is quite reasonable. There might be situations where a patient, maybe not in a coma, but possibly in a coma, but might be in a condition where they cannot communicate themselves and there's a medical emergency. Ambulance might turn up. It might be a condition which is affected, like which medication we give here depends on sex characteristics. And if you were to just turn up and be like, this person is male because their original birth certificate says so we're going to act exactly like the response that we do for cis men, and then it turns out the medication you're administering is wildly affected by hormones, and the person in front of you is actually, a trans woman or an intersex woman whose hormone levels are completely in the normal range for cis women, then you'll be given the wrong treatment. So this very question just reveals how ridiculous gender critical is, because it depends entirely on what the reason for you asking is. Like, if someone comes in and we have a medical emergency, we have two treatments, one for males and one for females. Katie, which one would you want in this situation? Well, my answer would be, for males, for what reason? And for females, for what reason? Is this treatment affected by hormones? Is it affected by gonads? Is it affected by genitals? Is it affected by chromosomes? And if so, which ones of those? In what ratios? How does it affect them? My body has the following of those combinations, and you cannot just assume that I am magically the same as a cis man just because we had the same letter on our original birth certificates, because that isn't how biology works and that isn't how science works. It says, explain what you mean by sex not being binary. I mean, that's exactly it. You've said, well, how do we work out what sex this one person is, A or B? And it's like, well, the whole point is it just depends entirely on what the situation you're being presented is. And if the treatment you need to give is affected only by hormones and not by chromosomes, which is more likely than the other way around, then my sex will be female. But if for some reason you had some medical treatment specifically which only did stuff for XY, and then we had a completely different treatment for XX, well then I would want the male one because that would keep me alive more. But generally, most of this stuff, hormones are going to be much more of an influence on most treatments which have sexual dimorphism, or sexual dimorphism, sexual differences between the two treatments, than chromosomes are, because chromosomes don't really do anything after you've been born. So yeah, and then just to address the final part and how that affects reproductions of humans. Lots of gender criticals have this kind of, well, you need a sperm and an egg to make a person, therefore that's all sex is. If you don't produce gametes, then you won't reproduce. I mean, that's how it affects reproduction. And just because someone doesn't produce gametes, it doesn't mean they're not a person. It doesn't mean they're not a man or a woman. But also, I mean, if you're making your definition of sex purely based on what gametes someone has, then you're creating 4 categories. You're creating someone who makes sperm, someone who makes eggs, someone who makes both, and someone who makes neither. And you can be like, no, because we could work out what they should have done if they would have done, and like, it's just rubbish. All we can do in science is just look at the actual material reality of what is going on. You can't say, oh, well, this person would have been male if they had been born different, but this other person, who is exactly the same set of characteristics, would have been female if they were born different in a different way. Yeah, it's just completely rubbish. All you can ever do is look at the actual characteristics someone actually has and make decisions based on that. And in the majority of cases, in medicine, in law, in life, in social interactions, your chromosomes and your gametes aren't the things that are important, whereas other parts of your sex sometimes are important, like your hormones or your genitals. So it's just completely nonsense to treat it as a binary, because just in reality, it just is not a binary. So yeah, gender criticals, fuck off. Someone saying here, that's not true. If you produce skin cells, you can make either kind of gamete. I mean, I'm sure that I don't know if we're at the point where we can create gametes out of people's skin cells. Are we there yet? That seems a bit sci-fi to me. That would be pretty cool though. But it's certainly true that eventually we'll get to the point where we'll be able to do it. I thought actually maybe I'd heard that two women have baby without sperm was the top thing, it says here. Thanks Google AI. 2 cis women, meaning assigned female at birth in a relationship, cannot become pregnant without some sort of assistance. Yeah, okay. I did know that one. I just wanted to know if there was a story. New fertility procedure. Let's have a look at this one. We're learning this one live. New fertility procedure allows 2 women to carry same baby, presents new choices for same-sex couples. I don't think this is what I wanted. I mean, I don't think this is what I was looking for. I was wondering if we had the science to like extract the information from a cell on like someone's skin, like you were suggesting, and then put it inside like a sperm or something, and then create 2 gametes which fuse to create a zygote based on like 2 cis men or 2 cis women's DNA. I'm not sure. They can make a sperm out of an ovary in the lab and an ovary out of testicular tissue in the lab. Interesting. If anyone knows about any of this, send it to me on Blue Sky, because I need to read up on it. I'm sure it is inevitable. It definitely sounds like something humans will one day be able to do and play God, because that's what we're best at. I think bone marrow. Yeah, it might be a stem cells thing. Possibly. 1 second. But yeah, I don't know how well I explain that stuff about different sex characteristics. It's called ROPA. Let's have a look. ROPA. Baby. Oh, okay. Here we go. Maybe this is it. Is a variant of in vitro fertilization. It's aimed at female couples who decide to have a baby together and want to actively involve in pregnancy. One undergoes ovarian stimulation to extract her eggs and fertilize them, and the other receives embryo in her uterus. This doesn't sound like... Yeah, this doesn't sound like what I was talking about. This is a case where you have, like, a third party's sperm, and then, like, woman A's egg, and then woman B's uterus. I was thinking, do we yet have a situation where we can get cell from woman A, get the genetic information, and give it to woman B with the woman B's egg, and like create a baby? I don't think we're first gametes made from skin. Chat seems to think that we're already there. I am interested if we are, but I don't think this is it. This isn't what I was talking about. We'll see. But anyway, that's completely irrelevant to anything I was talking about. It's just interesting. I think what I need to do is like make a presentation and draw some diagrams and stuff, so I can explain what I mean about all these different combinations of sex characteristics. But certainly, if you're in a situation where you need medical treatment and there's two treatments for men and women, as a trans person, you need to know for what reason these two treatments are different. I mean, it's not true for many treatments, but it's certainly true for some that there are different recommended medicine doses or different symptoms for conditions for men and women. And often that's based on hormones and body volume more than chromosomes. I don't think I've ever actually encountered in arguing with gender criticals a medical treatment which actually is based on which chromosomes you have. I'm not really sure what interaction that would have, but maybe one exists out there. And if it does, and I get into a situation where I want to live longer and I need one of treatments, sign me up to the fucking XY one, because that's what's important. What I care about more is when I'm in that situation and like need the female one, that I get that too, because that's what's important. Like the actual reality of biology, not some stupid gender critical categorization. Right, so we're going to talk about the stressful thing next. So we're going to talk about passports and what's going on in the USA at the moment. So this is Hunter Schafer. Oh God, I really should have looked up what she's famous for before I did this. Hunter Schafer, what's she famous for? American actress and model. I just know that she's a trans person celebrity. What did she must have worked in something. She's in the HBO teen drama series Euphoria. Okay, yeah, I haven't seen that. Sorry, everyone. I know it was meant to be really good. She was in The Hunger Games and Cuckoo. Okay, cool. Well, there she is. She's very pretty. And like enviously so. But she got a new passport, and because of what the Trump administration is doing, it now has the wrong details on it. So if we'll just play the clip of her story first, and then we'll talk about it.
And today, I saw it on my new passport mail. So now to specify, my gender markers were first changed in my teens when I first got my driver's license, and then passports following all have been female since then. Hasn't really been a problem. However, last year when I was filming in Barcelona, our car got broken into and my bag got stolen, and inside of that was my passport, which was supposed to last me up until my 30s. And so I got an emergency passport, which was very simple at the time. It's basically just a copy of my old passport, but temporary and only supposed to be used within the year. So as soon as I got back to the States, I had to get this fixed and get it replaced with a real proper passport, which I went to the Federal Passport Agency today in LA and did. I've had to do this one time before. No part of the process was different. I filled everything out just like I normally would. I put female, and when it was picked up today and I opened it up, they had changed the marker to male. And I'm not making this post to...
So, she goes on. You can listen to the whole thing. It's on her TikTok. But the story is basically she had a female passport from when she was a teenager, and then someone stole it, and she tried to get a new one, and unfortunately, it happened after the Trump administration made this horrible new decree where trans people can't have the right passport. She later says that she didn't change her birth certificate, so presumably that's how they found out. And now her passport has an M on it. She's quite defiant and says, like, fuck you, we're not going to stop being trans just because you put the wrong thing on our documents. But this I find incredibly stressful. She seems a little bit less stressed about it than I am, and it's happened to her and it hasn't happened to me. But also, maybe she's better at hiding her terror than I am. Or maybe, like I was saying at the start of this stream, is different things stress different people. And for some reason, this is something I find incredibly stressful. I feel like your passport is one of your most important documents. And maybe it doesn't seem so to people in the USA because you can basically travel to 50 different countries without having to cross the border in the USA. Whereas a British person, to go anywhere, you have to use your passport. And if something horrible starts happening in your own country and you have to go somewhere, to flee it for your own safety or whatever, having a passport makes such a big difference. If it has all your correct details on it. And just the idea that maybe one day, like if the UK voted in a far-right party here, which isn't impossible, it might even happen in the next election, we don't know, that they might try and take away trans people's passports. And it's just so terrifying for me, and that is my line in the sand where I just feel like I would have to get out. I am optimistic in the USA that when this administration goes, they might allow trans people to get the correct passports again. And when this administration goes, it could be within 6 months if there's a huge pushback to the crazy stuff they're doing, or it could be 20 years. We just don't know. And I don't want to, Hunter also says in her video, she doesn't want to fearmonger or scare people or, create community panic. And neither do I. I don't want to say to you, you need to get out of the USA or anything. You need to make your own decision and get safe for what you know. And if you're someone who maybe doesn't really travel much, or some of my trans friends in the USA don't even have passports and they don't really care. And if you live somewhere that's safe, that's great. You do not panic if you don't feel the panic. And also, I know that being able to travel is quite a privileged thing, which is also something Hunter says. Maybe I should just play the whole video, but it's 10 minutes long. I'm very privileged to travel, and I've been to loads of different countries since coming out as trans. I've been to more countries since coming out than I ever did before. And I've never had issues anywhere. But that's also because I have the correct details. I changed my passport quite early on in my transition, and haven't had an issue because of that. And to think that I've been to countries that are just very safe for trans people, like the Netherlands or France. But I have also been to a range of other countries, even countries like Japan, which are very safe countries, terrible for trans rights, and various other places. I don't want to start like shit talking various countries. But just knowing that it could flag me up for harassment is kind of like the least bad thing that could happen. I mean, you could be denied entry if your documents don't match who you are, or all this kind of stuff. Personally terrifies me, and I'm very worried that the UK could just follow suit. But what kind of makes this even worse is like the two parts of my fear are unfolding at the same time. So as well as the US just revoking trans people's passports and issuing them ones with the wrong details, Erin in the morning here points out that Marco Rubio, who is I can't remember what his official title is, it's one of the fucking Trump goons, has changed the rules on getting a visa and has now banned basically any trans people from getting visas to the US. So she's saying Marco Rubio may have just banned trans foreigners seeking visas from US entry. So the new memo, effective immediately across all posts, has barred trans people with updated gender markers seeking visas. It's ostensibly focused on preventing trans athletes from traveling to the US. However, one section appears to apply far more broadly, targeting all trans visa applications, not just athletes. It mandates all visas must reflect an applicant's sex at birth and grants the authority to deny visas based on reasonable suspicion of a person's transgender identity. Both immigrant and non-immigrant visa applications requests that an applicant identify their sex as either male or female. Moreover, all visas must reflect an applicant's sex at birth, the cable reads. When verifying the applicant's sex assigned at birth, it states that the adjudicator can rely on documents provided by the applicant, but if other evidence casts reasonable doubt on the applicant's sex, she should refuse the case and request additional evidence to demonstrate sex at birth. So, oh, no, sorry, there is actually more. This is quite important. The memo goes on to state that applicants misrepresenting their sex, misrepresenting their purpose of travel or sex, like the two big things, like, are you a terrorist? Are you trans? Like the two terrible, horrific things, like, sneaking in to steal an American's job or sneaking in to exist in public as a transsexual, like the two evil things that someone might do. You could be targeted for permanent ineligibility, which is it's just so grim. It's just so dark and grim to me. Like, that they're taking away people's passports and then even refusing visas. Like, as a British person, the idea of traveling to the USA on holiday, or to be a tourist, or something for me personally, maybe to go to the Pokemon World Championships one year, as it's in the USA for the next 2 years. Like, they're just a very reasonable thing to expect people do. I know some of my close friends are planning a trip to the USA at the moment. And just now knowing that I could just not go, it's just so weird. And again, this is probably like a privileged position because British passports for my entire life have been very like valuable passports, in that you can pretty much go anywhere pretty much without any questions, and that just isn't true for most of the world. And maybe you're listening to me being like, Katie, this is ridiculous. I'm from this country and we can't even go to the UK or the US at all. And if that's the case, then yeah, that's really grim too. I used to have a close friend who was Iranian, and to just go anywhere was just such a struggle for him. And that it really made me appreciate how good my passport was, that I can just go anywhere, and I've never really had a problem with it. And updating my passport was really easy, because despite what all of the like the gender critical movement and the media and stuff have been saying, we've had self ID on passports in the UK, like, who knows how long, decades, and it's never once been an issue. But you need documents to be correct to travel places. Like if your documents don't match, like they're at the same time they're saying you have to issue your sex at birth, and then they're also saying that you could be permanently banned from entering the US if your documents don't match who you are. So, well, I guess people like me are just fucked then. And like a gender critical person with absolutely no empathy or considering trans people humans at all might be like, well, why don't you just change it back then? I was like, well, because all the other countries that I go to, then my documents won't match. Like, the border agents have to check all kinds of things when they're looking at your documents. And when you're a woman and your document says M on it, some of them might be like, oh, this just must be a trans person from a country that doesn't allow her to update her documents. That's fine. She's not an issue. But some aren't going to think that. And in some places, you really, really do not want to get in trouble with border agents. Like, even just traveling as a tourist. It's one of those things where suddenly your rights don't really matter. You certainly can get in terrible situations. And I never want to be in a position where I can't travel, because if the UK government starts doing a tyranny against trans people of the scale that's happening in the USA now, what the fuck am I going to do if I can't go? Yes, it's just really terrifying just watching all this happen. You can see in Aaron's thing here all of the more details if you want to have a look. I'll try and link it below. But I just want people to realize, like, if you're a trans person and you're watching this, you probably already know about this. And if you're learning it from me, then I'm sorry, it's horrifying. But like, I want cis people to know, like, just how extreme this is getting. Like, they're at the point where they're denying trans people entry into the country and invalidating their travel documents. Like, this is just so extreme. This is like not just, oh, this is the lead up to fascism, what might happen. This is it. It's fucking here right now. They're doing a fascism against trans people right now. And it's affecting everyone. It's not just affecting, like, the 3 trans people in the world who play sport at a level higher than rubbish. It's not just affecting that one trans criminal that you know the name of for some reason. It's not just affecting, like, people, whoa, just different people, who knows? Like, it's affecting every trans person. Just think about it. Like, I know that the media wants to portray us as, like, these weird, crazy, whatever. Literally just a normal person. The only reason that anyone is watching this is just because I'm a loudmouth, but I'm not really different to any other trans people. And, I mean, Hunter Shaver isn't really any different either. She's just a good actress who happens to be too pretty. But, you know, they're taking away our ability to even visit as a tourist. Like, it's really insane. Like, really grim. And this isn't the end of it. Like, if you think this is as far as they're going to go, you're naive, because it never ever has removing people's documents been the last thing that fascists do. Is never the end goal is not just removing documents. I don't want to fearmonger for trans people in these situations, but there are people, like, think how many people all the time, all around the world, who are like, oh, I'm starting a new job in this country. Oh, I'm starting a new degree and I want to travel the world and I want to see this and I've got this trip lined up and my family lives here, so I have to go out to a funeral. And, like, there's so many reasons that people travel. Not everyone is just some, dickhead like me who wants to sightsee and go see the mountains or whatever, go see Yellowstone. There are people who need to do this stuff for their job and their family. And I was, like, in two minds about whether to message all my colleagues today on, like, the work chat about it, because I just feel like it's getting so extreme. Like, I work for an international company, and when I first started working in jobs, all of my peers who had been working only just like 5 years longer than me, they all talked about how they would get flown out to various places like India and Taiwan and the USA, because that's where lots of the operations for the stuff that I do happen. And that was the way you met people, and it's the way you talk to other teams and set out projects and all this kind of stuff. And I was thinking a message to my colleagues being like, I never thought I'd say I'm like glad for Zoom calls and glad for video meeting. Like, video meetings are fucking terrible. They're way worse than in-person meetings. I would rather, in our office we have a meeting room which we can go, and when it's a team of like 6 people and you're all in the same office, you can go and have a talk with a whiteboard, and it's just so much nicer. Like, conversation's so much easier. But if you need to, for your work to go out, I mean, work in the industry or work in the government, or scientists collaborating or doctors collaborating, or like if you needed to go out and you've got this thing booked and then all of a sudden they announce, right, that's it, fuck it, trans people can't come. I mean, the first thing is that what the hell do you do now as a trans person? Like, you're going to have to tell your employer that, oh, I can't go because there's a chance that they won't let me in because I'm trans. Your employer might not even know you're trans. So now you're stuck in this horrible situation where you have to come out to your employer, and then maybe they won't consider you for a promotion. They might not want to hire you because they want to hire people who can travel around the world. Like, if you're an international salesman and you're whatever, why would they hire someone who can't go to the USA? They're not going to. So trans people lose jobs over this. If your family are there and you need to see someone who's like dying, or there's just so many things. It's just so grim. And for what? Like, what is this all for? Who gains from this? Who gains anything from trans people being banned from entry from the US or having their passports removed? No one. The only people that get anything from this are people whose entire self-worth and pathetic value in life is wrapped up in forcing people into some cis heteronormative, everyone must act this way or this way, and I get all my value from being a man who's superior to women and gay people should be eradicated or whatever. Like, those people and the fucking cultist freaks in the, who get their enjoyment and sense of worth from trans people suffering. There are people like that. I fucking encounter them all the time. They genuinely enjoy trans people suffering and they're getting something out of this, but no rational person is getting anything out of this. No, like, this isn't helping anyone's safety. This isn't helping the economy. I mean, it's damaging both those things. It's making people less safe and it's damaging the economy. And they're the things that people usually pretend to care about the most. It's not helping children. It's not helping families. It's not helping like diplomacy. It's not, there's literally no gain to this at all. It's like power mad, like cultist types wanting to hurt trans people as much as they can, wipe us out from society because they're offended by us. And that's it. And it's not hypothetical. We've been talking about this. Like, the trans movement has been talking about this kind of stuff in the hypothetical, in the near term, for a few years now. Like, oh, it's coming, it's coming. It sounds almost like Game of Thrones. Oh, winter is coming. They just say it every single episode. And you're like, yeah, whatever. It's here now. Winter has arrived. It's happening right now. All this stuff that we've been saying is going to happen for years is happening right now in front of our eyes. And what are you going to do about it? So, yeah, incredibly depressing. We're going to keep going. We've got a few more depressing things. So on the topic of the US government attacking trans people for absolutely no reason, to no benefit to anyone, and in fact to everyone's detriment, we have some stuff on the military ban. So the Trump government has again tried to ban all trans people from the military, and it just makes absolutely no sense at all. These are people who are already working in the military, already in roles from everything from, like, troops on the front line to people working in communications to people building airplanes, like everything. The US military is huge. It's like one of the biggest things on Earth, one of the biggest organizations on Earth, and it does loads of stuff. And the like banning trans people from that, at best, in the short term, will cause huge disruption and take away the careers of thousands and thousands of people. Now, you might think the US military, the US war machine, is one of the most evil things humans have ever created. And yeah, it's terrible. I'm not going to try and defend the US military or any military. They're all bad. The ones that are defending are a bit better than the ones that are invading. Before you try and say that I think the Ukraine and Russia situation is both sidesing or anything. But the reality is these things exist, and trans people are such a tiny minority of the population. They're just normal people who need to live and exist. And trans people in general already find it harder to get jobs, full stop, because of prejudice, because of being denied legal documents, because of being kicked out by their families, having worse upbringings, all this kind of stuff. And so the military has traditionally been something which will offer like almost anyone a job, because they want to recruit people and send them off to die in foreign lands or whatever. And if you're someone who works in the military but is like, man, the military's grim, but what else can I do? Then how can anyone really attack you for that? You've got to live. You've got to feed yourself. You've got to feed your children. If you're someone who constantly votes to increase the military spending budget or whatever, you're someone who's constantly warmongering, you can fuck off. You are part of the problem. But just trans people existing in the military you cannot blame the individuals. And I think that even if you feel like you can blame the individuals in the military, then them just banning all the trans people is clearly still bad. Like, that's not good. It's not like, they banned all the trans people. That's good. Can't wait till they ban all the cis people. They're not going to ban all the cis people. That's ridiculous. It's a completely ridiculous angle to have on this. But also, maybe if you're one of these fucking freak dickheads who think that what's the problem with banning trans people from, they're all just mentally ill. If you just calling trans people mentally ill, which by the way is just factually false. Every single major medical organization disagrees with you. You have no idea what you're talking about. Even if that was true, mental illness means loads of different things. Like, anxiety is a type of mental illness. So is fear of spiders to the point where it affects your life. So is like depression. These are all forms of mental illness. And you can have those things and still perform perfectly well in your job in the military. So that isn't the issue. And the issue isn't trans people not performing well enough, because there are strict rules on how well you have to perform. You would just get fired. If they said, we're going to fire everyone who isn't performing well enough, then it wouldn't be unfairly targeting trans people. The issue is you're just picking out a group of people and you're saying, I hate these people. I am willing to make the thing that I'm pretending to care about worse for everyone in order to hurt them for no reason. Anyway, we're now looking at a judge who's dealing with this new ridiculous ruling. And it's quite a good dunk. That's all we can get out of this. They're ruining people's lives, but we get to see some dunks. So the judge here says, can we agree that the greatest fighting force is not going to be impacted in any way by less than 1% of the soldiers using a different pronoun than others might want to call them? Just imagine having to pretend to be a rational person defending Trump's military ban. It's just so transparently insane and pointless and evil. I can't agree with that there. So then she says, I don't know why I thought it was a she. The judge says, would you agree with me that if our military is negatively impacted in any kind of way that matters, we all have a lot bigger problems than pronoun use? We have a military that is incompetent. Any common sense, rational human being knows that it doesn't. It is a pretext. It's quite frankly ridiculous. If you want to get me an officer of the US military who is willing to get on the stand and say that because of pronoun usage, the US military is less prepared, because of pronoun usage, I will be the first to give you a box of cigars. Exactly. Like, good dunk. Like, just fuck off. Like, oh no, like 1 in every 500 people here has asked to be called a different pronoun to what you were calling them before. That's it. The US is finished. Like, China and Russia are now the world's superpowers. Like, some people here are taking hormones and are still just exactly as good at their job as they were before, but now are happier and more competent and more a bit able to contribute to society. The whole military's coming crashing down. It's just so, like, transparently ridiculous, the idea that trans people are negatively affecting anything here. There's another one. So the judge says this order causes an entire category of people dishonest, dishonorable, undisciplined, immodest, who lack integrity. People have taken an oath to defend this country. People have been under fire. People have received medals for taking fire for this country. I want to know from the government whether that language expresses animus. Does that express animus? Not in any constitutional, in a common sense way. This is a policy from the President of the United States affecting thousands of people. To call an entire group of people lying, dishonest people who are undisciplined, immodest, and have no integrity. How is it anything other than showing animus? Exactly. Get fucked. Of course it is. The idea of just calling all trans people dishonorable, like, what are you talking about? Based on what? What about being trans makes you lack honor? Being transphobic very clearly makes you lack honor and makes you a dishonest liar, because you're willing to make up bullshit reasons to target trans people just because they were born different. That it's just so transparently bigotry. Like, there's nothing else to it. It's just, that's it. It's just shallow, hollow, nothing behind it, raw hatred of people for being born different. The attorney, of course, says, I don't have an answer for you. And then the judge says, you do have an answer. You just don't want to give it. Exactly. Like the standard gender critical response. They know the answer and they can't say it out loud because then they would have to admit that we were right. People can make a solid arguments as to why some or even most trans people shouldn't be in the military. We're dealing with they can't, but I think they're trying to be like, well, you could make the argument, but no one has. We're dealing with unadulterated animus. We're dealing with the President of the United States, dealing with a group of people serving their country, calling them liars. The judge then said, oh, I was right, it was a she. She changed her courtroom orders to bar people who graduated from UVA Law School from appearing before her. That's this attorney, by the way. Because they're all liars, lack integrity, or undisciplined, and can't possibly meet the high rigors of benign a lawyer for the government. I guess that meant to say of being. She made the DOJ lawyer sit out on that basis, and then after he did, she called him back up and asked him whether that was a display of animus. Amazing. Get fucked. I'm glad that there are people with any kind of power at all using any kind of common sense. And by the way, this again, and we've seen this with all the stuff we've talked about so far this week. This isn't a trans person, like, coming up with the correct argument, saying like, oh yeah, you might be able to argue that some trans people should be banned as well. You can't. This isn't some trans rights activist. This isn't like some far left communist, whatever. This is a fucking judge who already skew conservative anyway, who is just looking at this in a common sense way without being an irrationally prejudiced prick, like overtly so, and just being like, well, this doesn't make any sense at all. This is like, it seems good because of what we're up against, but this isn't even that good. This is like center. This is the most generic, middle of the road position that any rational person would take without knowing anything about what's going on. Are you seriously telling me that pronouns are making the biggest military force that the world has ever seen, like, inoperable? Are you seriously trying to tell me that calling an entire group of people dishonest isn't prejudice? Like, no, everyone can see this. Everyone can fucking see it. It's so ridiculous that anyone's pretending not to. And we just need to give up on playing their games. And like, we can see this. So this is something related to this. So this is Christopher Rufo, who's a Nazi from America. And he's saying, Scoop. Tulsi Gabbard, who is now the director of national intelligence. This is a congresswoman in the USA. I actually first learnt about Tulsi Gabbard when all the gender critical. She came out as gender critical because of course she's fucking gender critical. And they were all like, "Oh, a liberal left-wing feminist who opposes gender ideology in the US government." Tulsi Gabbard is not a liberal left-wing feminist. What are you talking about? Like every time there's a new person that the gender criticals are all praising, and they're saying, "See, this is a normal left-wing liberal feminist type who just disagrees with trans people." Always within months, it turns out that they're like some, everything you expect them to be when you find out someone's gender critical, some right-wing, anti-feminist activist or whatever. And anyway. So, Chris Rufo says she is preparing a memo directing all intelligence agencies to identify the employees who participated in the NSA's obscene, pornographic, and sexually explicit chat rooms and to terminate their employment and revoke their security clearances. Deadline Friday. So, Chris Rufo is a classic example of someone who, he will play the game and pretend to be ignorant and like, "Oh, yeah. Oh, I just want to ban people. Why are people talking about porn at work?" And you might be like, "Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't really have a problem with banning people from talking about porn." Like, I don't really have a problem. I don't think people should be, like, at my office, if they found out that someone was, like, watching porn at their desk or something, and then they got, like, some disciplinary or whatever, I'm not going to be like, that seems reasonable to me, personally. At least in a fucking office, like, come on. But Chris Rufo's a good example of someone who does that, like, kind of, "Oh, all I'm saying is this," but then the next second he will say the fucking quite a bit out loud, and he always does, and he's very two-faced about it. A good example, maybe, of someone who is dishonest, dishonorable, undisciplined, immodest, and lacks integrity. In fact, I think that sums him up perfectly. But every time, under the most mildest pressure, he will say the quiet bit out loud. And so someone, and don't get too attached to this person because he seems like an idiot as well, has said, "This is going to destroy the US intelligence capabilities." And then, I mean, like, okay, so if you said, right, just imagine for a second, you'll take him at his word, and we're saying, they're going to kick out people who were on a pornographic chat room working for the NSA. If you saw someone saying this is going to destroy the intelligence capabilities, you might be like, "Well, how is that? Because there are so many people who view porn at work in the NSA, that, like, it's going to weaken that. Like, is there like thousands that are going to have to kick out?" So the response would be, "Oh, it's not actually because there's not that many people, or this is just affects a few, like, whatever." No, he says, "Yes, trans fetishists are the backbone of our democracy. They won the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, blah, 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 blah." Being sarcastic, obviously. And then there's another one here saying, "There is a battalion of male to female transgenders within the American intelligence apparatus. They hate..." Okay, this is gender criticals are all mental, by the way. So, as we've seen before, they hate Italians and libs of TikTok. What a fucking sentence. "They fantasize about pseudo-vaginas and butthole lasers." They're in charge of the most sophisticated spying machine in human history. This thing, I mean, with all of these, you see this time and time again. You see this so many times throughout LGBT rights history. Some lying, dishonorable, dishonest piece of shit Nazi type will say, "Oh, we just need to ban people who are being sexually inappropriate," and they do that to get the centrists on board. And then it turns out when they say sexually inappropriate, they just mean gay people, full stop. They just mean trans people. They don't actually care about anyone who's being sexually inappropriate. In fact, most of these people are, like, pro-rape and think that marrying children is okay and have no issue with Trump sexually assaulting women at all. Like, they don't care about any of this fucking stuff. They just want to get rid of trans people, and they know if they frame it like this, then people will be less likely to oppose it than if they frame it like this. So, like what I was saying earlier is, why are people still tolerating this bullshit? Like, we know that they've played all their cards now. We can see what they're doing. He's saying out loud they want to fire all the trans people who work at the NSA. And again, the NSA is an evil spying agency which is doing immoral things, blah, blah, blah. People work there, whatever. He isn't having an issue with it being the most sophisticated spying machine in human history. He has an issue that they are trans people. Like, that's the issue here. And they're just so transparent. So when they say all this bullshit, when they're like, oh, we just want to make the military run more efficiently, oh, we just want to make sure no one's viewing porn at work, like, you know they're lying. They know they're lying, and they're like taking glee in the fact that they can lie and trick centrists into agreeing with them. But you all know they're lying now, right? Like, they're just explicitly trying to target trans people, and they're just trying to say it in a way that some people will buy into. And you always need to realize that these people are just so ridiculous. Like, it's like we saw with the porn obsessed gender critical from last week. You should all go watch that video if you haven't seen it yet. They have absolutely no grip on reality at all. He thinks, just to be clear, that's fucking Nazi dude. He thinks a battalion of male to female transgenders within the American intelligence apparatus is a good sentence, but I'm sure there are trans people who work at every level of the US government. They hate Italians and libs of libs of TikTok. It's just so much. It's just so ridiculous. Like, what, trans people hate Italians? Is that like a thing that you're? Is this like some internet meme maybe that you are trying to? Maybe you're even too stupid to realize otherwise, or you're just trying to spin because that's all you ever do. And of course they hate libs of TikTok. Like, every rational person hates libs of TikTok because libs of TikTok exist purely to hate LGBT people. They fantasize about pseudo vaginas and butthole lasers. Like, says that as if it's like some. I mean, fantasize pseudo vaginas, butthole lasers. I mean, some people have laser hair removal. It's quite common for women, and some men, and sometimes that includes in your genital areas, and sometimes it doesn't. That is just normal person things. And some people want to have genital surgery. That is an issue. Yeah. One of the positives from the Trump administration is all of the stuff we've been saying that the transphobes, the gender criticals, the Republicans, etc., have been moving towards. All of it is just happening in front of our eyes. We weren't wrong about any of it. And now the centrists and people who have been saying you're exaggerating and stuff, and oh, you're being so hyperbolic, they now have a choice of either sticking their head in the sand so deep that we can't hear them talking anymore, or admitting the reality of what's happening, or becoming lying grifters and lying on behalf of the transphobes. So that is a positive, that they can't really hide it as much anymore. But that is not to say that it's just gonna come for free. Like, we have to work on this. We have to make sure everyone knows about it. We have to talk about this because the mainstream media is going to be all bought out by all the billionaires, and they're not going to be allowed to talk about it. We just saw Jeff Bezos today saying that they're only going to talk about like freedom or something. Like, he's just firing the opinion editors so that no one criticizes the Trump government. We still have to talk about it. We still have to highlight all this stuff. You need to make sure people know about it. But at the same time, it's just so easy to say. When you say, oh, look, they're trying to wipe trans people out of public life, and you get some person, oh, you're being hyperbolic. It's like, oh, well, look, they've just removed all trans people's passports, and they're trying to fire all trans people from the military, and they're also trying to get rid of all trans people from working in the security agencies. And it's just so explicit. It's just so obvious. Open your eyes. Look at what's going on. Stop being a dickhead. So, what do we have here? We have one more topic to cover, and then one more thing to discuss, and then maybe we'll call it a day. But we do have some definitely more ranting. This is a very ranty episode. So I got 2 waters to start this off, and Poppy's been drinking out of one of them. Okay, I can see which one it is because it's got cat hair in it. Poppy only ever drinks out of waters that I've made for myself, so she is down here. Let's get Poppy up for some chat enjoyment moment. Here she is. Don't know if you can hear her purring. No, I don't think it's being picked up on the microphone. Got a noise gate on there. Your noise is being cropped out, Poppy. Don't tread my tights. They're new. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, how's chat doing? You're still all awake. You're still all alive. Someone's saying, I saw chat going past saying, you can get butthole lasers. Why didn't no one tell me? I don't know if you want that, like, to fire out. You definitely don't want it firing in. That would be painful. Laser hair removal isn't too bad. Just as an aside, it's not too painful, but it's definitely uncomfortable. It's yeah, it's not the greatest thing in the world. Definitely burns. Oh yeah, like the video exactly. Like the video for a Poppy encore. How many likes have we got on the YouTube video right now? Let's have a look. Let's find out. Then we can set a target, and if we get enough likes, then Poppy will come back. And if she won't, she'll be if we don't get enough likes, she'll be fed into a blender. How many likes have we got on the YouTube video? We are at, according to this, 157 likes. If we reach 200 likes, guys, then you'll see more Poppy. And if not, you'll never see Poppy on this show again. Poppy appreciation. Well, we should just have a maybe I should get one of those little cameras that goes on a cat's head so we can see what Poppy's up to. It won't be very exciting. She's not really an outdoor cat. Yeah, threats, exactly. I'm threatening you. I'm blackmailing my own chat. It's interesting that so Poggle Rebecca here saying laser removal was bad at the start. The first session is the worst and it gets easier. I had the opposite experience. I felt maybe it's because they had different settings or something, but I felt that they went on quite a low setting to start and it wasn't that bad, and then they just kept turning it up and it got worse and worse. But yeah, after most of your hair follicles are gone, then it stops being painful, I guess. It's probably just because it heats up the hair follicles. So if you have loads of follicles there, then it causes more hotness, more heat gets there, so it'd be more problem. Oh, wait, okay, little detour, little sidetrack story here. So, just because I was seeing someone saying laser hair removal really hurts, it's like being stabbed with a fistful of needles that have dripped in lava and struck by lightning. Okay, so little story for my transition. I had a bunch of laser hair removal on my face, which was really good. Probably the single best dysphoria removing part of transition that I had. Like, it's great. Recommend it to anyone. If you're even considering it, fucking go for it. It's just so good. I really recommend laser hair removal. And if you're someone who doesn't have hair on your face and you're considering it for other things, if you have the right combination of hair color and skin color, then you can laser anywhere, and just it's really good. I also had it on my underarms and various other places. Yeah, I recommend laser. But it's not the only form of hair removal, and laser can only do certain things. So it can only do. I know there are different lasers. Certainly when I was going, it could only do like dark hairs. And I think they had ones so they could do any skin tone now. They can certainly do lighter skin tones. I don't know if they can do all skin tones. I'm sorry, I don't have that information. Definitely look it up, but I do know that different lasers have different capabilities, and some do better on different hair types and different skin tones. But they laser can't do like white hairs or grey hairs or anything. And unfortunately, I'm starting to get some grey hairs. But just when you have facial hair, there are some light hairs just mixed in sometimes. And the only way to remove those is electrolysis. So laser works by just having an actual laser, like focused light, and it targets your hair follicles and it heats them up. And the idea is it causes them to get really hot just in a really short amount of time, and it burns the hair follicle and basically destroys it. And the reason you have to go to laser a lot, and the reason it only works on dark hair, well, okay, so the reason it originally only worked on dark hair and light skin tone is because it only wants to target. You want to be able to just target the hair follicles rather than all of the skin cells, because then you would cause just skin damage. So the idea was that you would pick one that causes just a certain frequency of light, just to target just the hair color, which would then heat up and just damage that one thing. So you can cover a whole area with lasers, and it would just target the hair follicles. And how it works is the hair goes beneath just the skin. It's not just on the surface. If you ever plucked a hair out, you can see that it goes further in. You know, there's a little way down, and then sometimes you end up with like a little thing attached. And basically the hair has like 3 phases, and it starts off. It's hard to do with one hand. I'm stroking Poppy with the other. It starts off like this, if the skin's here and there's like the base of the follicles here, like the hair grows up and then it breaks through the skin and then like detaches from the bottom hair follicle base or whatever. So if you laser when the hair is poking out and also it's attached, then it can heat up and travel down and destroy the follicle. But if you laser when it's not attached, then it will just cause the hair to fall out and then a new one will grow. So you have to do laser a lot, and you have to do the same areas a lot, and it like reduces it by a certain percentage each time. And you get to the point where electrolysis is the only real option left. And electrolysis works on any hair type, and it has a completely different process. I think there's different versions of electrolysis, but my understanding is they actually find a hair follicle and they have like this needle thing, and they like poke it right in and they zap it basically, and it destroys the hair follicle by actually touching the hair follicle rather than by just sending energy down this dark hair. I'm not an expert, that's my understanding from talking to the technicians and researching and stuff. But electrolysis has different modes, and they can do them in combinations, or they can just do one. They could just basically have like a soldering iron mode, basically, where they just stick heat in. There's also like an electricity mode where they like zap it at the same time. There's like a combination. So I got to the point where I was like, well, I think I've got like some electrolysis on the NHS, and I was like, okay, well, I'll go for this because it might help. Didn't really have any hairs left, just like a couple of light ones. And the lady who was setting up, she was like, oh, you know, go through the standard like health thing, you know, do you have all these conditions, you know, heart problems and stuff. Just went through and just ticked no to everything, like I usually do, because I'm quite fortunate. You put asthma in the box for whatever, but you know, you just kind of go through it all and just expect it to be whatever. And she's like, oh, okay, so we can try the combination one, which like it uses the heat and the electricity and the whatever else is going on. I was like, yeah, okay, cool. I have quite a high pain threshold. I've done laser before. I've been punched in the face before. I know where the various levels of pain are, and I was like totally ready for it. I'd heard that it wasn't as bad as laser, so I was like, that's gonna be fine. So she put the like little needle thing in, and it felt like someone had just got a soldering iron and just jammed it into my face. Like, it was excruciating, like beyond any, like absolute insane levels of burning. Like it felt like my whole like mouth and my whole head was hurting. I felt like I could like taste it at the same time. Like I really struggled not to scream. And she was like, do you have a low pain threshold? I was like, no. Actually, I have quite a high pain threshold. I didn't think laser was that bad. She was like, okay. And she did another one. It was horrific. She's like, this is really strange. I've never seen anyone react so badly to this. The only reason why I think you could react so badly to this is like, so I got it on the electricity mode. Like, if you had like metal plates in your head, I was like, oh yeah, I got metal plates in my head. I have like a metal part here and a metal part here. It's like part of the FFS stuff. And because it was on like the electricity mode, it was like I frying my skull or something. That was fucking horrific. And I thought I could like taste metal, and my whole head felt like it was gonna explode. It's probably just like, I don't know, I was like plugging my head into the mains or something. And she was like, "Oh gosh, okay." And then she switched that mode off and just did the heat one, and it was just like not as painful as laser. She's like, "Oh, you're reacting like I thought you would now." I was like, "Yeah." But there wasn't specifically a box on the form saying, "Do you have metal plates in your head?" Because if it said that, I would have thought, "Oh yeah." It just said like, "Is there anything else that might be a problem?" Like I just checked all the things like, "No, I'm not. I don't have heart problems and all this kind of stuff." So I was like, maybe the form should say, "Do you have metal plates in your head?" Because, yeah, I'm a cyborg, yeah. Because there are going to be trans people coming here, and some of them are going to have metal plates in their head. So yeah, bear that in mind if you're going to electrolysis and you've, for any reason, had metal bits, because it was an experience. But right, we're gonna. Titanium isn't conductive though. No, I don't. I don't know why. This is. I don't understand the science behind it either. Yeah, I mean, I presume that it's titanium that's in my head. I mean, presumably it's not iron. But yeah, something was going on there. Whatever the whatever setting it was. Someone here saying laser made my fillings hurt. Vela saying that. I don't have fillings, so I wouldn't know. But yeah, maybe who knows what's going on with all this stuff. I just felt like laser was like, I mean, they often say it's like getting a rubber band and pinging it on your skin, but doing it like 3 times a second. That is kind of what laser's like, and it's like, oh, 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 it's not very nice. Oh, 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 oh. And electrolysis was like someone sticking a very small needle. It was probably like acupuncturist, like someone sticking a small needle in and like wriggling about a bit and then pulling it out. It wasn't too bad, like plucking a hair. But the mode, whatever it was on, it was like, just like oh man, it was a bad time. Anyway, let's move on and talk about this next thing. So next we're going to talk about Anna Sawar, who is Scottish Labour's leader. So Scotland has their own Labour Party, and so they're not the same party that Keir Starmer is in charge of, but they are related. And they often lose to the SNP, which is Scotland's national party. Anyway, so this isn't the same as Keir Starmer coming out and saying something, but it's still not good. And he says Scottish Labour wouldn't support the gender recognition bill now in a U-turn. He says he outlined his regrets that the Scottish Labour previously supported the gender recognition reform bill. Knowing what we know now, we would not have supported the bill, he told Holyrood Sources podcast in a screeching U-turn. Knowing what you know, what do you know now? So, just a quick summary. In the UK, in order to change your birth certificate and a few other things, like to get a marriage certificate, to get a death certificate, that kind of stuff, you need to get a gender recognition certificate. Already, this seems complicated and pointless, because why can't you just update those things in the first place? But this is the tip of the iceberg. gender recognition certificate. I needed to send off like 45 pages. I needed a description of my genitals. I needed a description of my fashion choices. I needed like a full medical history, like an insane amount of stuff. A signature from a solicitor I'd never met. Like just so many things. It's completely stupid. And so we were pushing for that to get reformed. In England and Wales, they were going to reform it, and then the gender critical movement happened, and then they didn't. They didn't have any reason why they didn't do it, but because it was politically good to attack trans people, they did that. But Scotland is generally more left-wing than the rest of the UK, and they have their own control over their own gender recognition bill, and so they actually passed the reform and said we're going to reform it. And for the first time ever, the wider UK government, which is England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, the overarching government stepped in and overruled Scotland's own decision for the first time ever, specifically to stop trans people from updating documents slightly easier, so they didn't have to have some man they'd never met review their fashion choices, which is something I actually had to submit, by the way. This man who I met for 5 minutes said that I had very convincing feminine accessories, and it's like fucking absolute joke. So the government risked causing a international diplomatic incident over making that different because the media and fucking bullshit. And but Scotland passed it, the UK overruled it, and then they just gave up because fuck trans people, who cares? And he's saying, knowing what we know, what do you know now? What has changed? I mean, maybe if you were going to say, if we knew the UK government was going to try and, ruin Scotland's autonomy over its own laws, then we wouldn't have caused a fuss or something pathetic like that. Or maybe you could say, seeing that they've passed this exact bill in 20 plus other countries, here's some new data that we actually have some actual data showing that it would be a problem. No. You don't have that because there isn't any data showing that, because every single country that has passed a bill like this has had no issues at all. Like, that is just a fact. That is just a observable fact of every single country that's passed this. There has been no problems with it. Of course, because why would there ever be a problem? Like, you're like, oh, what if a criminal one? Why would a criminal update their fucking birth certificate when they can commit the crime without their birth certificate? It makes no sense at all. Like, the whole premise of opposing this is nonsense. Like, complete nonsense. Anyway, he's obviously decided that he's gender critical now, or it's politically beneficial for him to hate trans people. And so he's just been like, fuck it. Fuck trans people. Gender critical's what I'm doing now. And he's just going to lie. He's just going to make it up. Knowing what we know now, what? He's never going to say, because they haven't learnt anything new. There's no evidence to oppose the Gender Recognition Act reform at all, and that's why they never give any. They do these ridiculous hypotheticals, and, oh, we're concerned about women's safety in general, but they never say something like, in Germany, which passed this law 6 years ago, the amount of trans people committing crimes is gone up by 5, or the number of cis people changing their birth certificate in order to burglarize something has gone up tenfold. Like, because they don't have any data. They have nothing. Literally nothing to oppose this at all. It's what they have is they have all the power and they have the media, and that's all they need. They don't have any rational arguments. They don't have any data. They don't have any statistics. They don't have literally nothing. Anyway, this whole thing is very frustrating, and I've talked about it for years. So yeah, the reform would have allowed trans people to change the thing. They love this phrase self-identify, but what does that even mean? I mean, what does self-identify even mean? Like, you would still have to fill in a form and get the government to approve it, and that's what you have to do today, and that's what you'd have to do then. Only today, you have to get a whole range of men that you've never encountered before to tick a box, and you have to pay them to do it, or to write a little report saying that actually they found you quite attractive, or to write a full description of what your genitals are like, because why that affects anything? Like, how is that related? Bullshit. So he says, He did not regret supporting Holyrood's gender reforms, but insisted tighter curbs on sex offenders should have been introduced. They love to. Oh, then this line says Scottish Labour did not put forward any amendments relating to sex offenders at the time, because they're just making it up. It's just politically relevant for them to hate trans people now, so they're just going to say all the things they need to say. It's so easy for them to sell this like fear mongering around trans people and sex offenders. Oh, imagine if there was a trans person who was a sex offender. Should they have human rights? Oh yeah, maybe we shouldn't give any trans people human rights. That's a good point. It doesn't affect it. Like, a sex offender, regardless of whether they're trans or not, goes to prison. Ideally, should go to prison, though if they're a cis man, they usually don't. But if they go to prison and they're a danger to the other prisoners, they're not going to be put in with the general population of prisoners, or they certainly shouldn't be. And whether they're trans or not shouldn't affect that at all. It should be the exact same protocol for everyone. Someone who is a rapist isn't a worse rapist if they're trans. If they're a danger to other prisoners, they're not a worse danger to other prisoners if they're trans. Whether or not they have a gender recognition certificate doesn't make them worse or less bad. It's completely meaningless. If someone is a sex offender and you're like, oh, well, should they really be given the privilege of being able to change their... They should have the same human rights as everyone else, but they should just be put in a position where they can't be a harm to anyone else in society. Like, you shouldn't be, should sex offenders really have access to, like, heart surgery? Should they really have access to, like, insulin? Well, yeah. I happen to believe that we shouldn't be doing cruel and unusual punishments on people in prison just because they're horrible people who have done horrible things. Going to prison is the whole point. Like, that's the punishment. If someone has diabetes, you shouldn't be like, oh, well, we should have tighter regulations on sex offenders having access to insulin. Why? Are you taking insulin away from all the other sex offenders? No. Are you removing the legal documents of all the other sex offenders? No, you're not. It's just completely orthogonal nonsense. You just know that if you say sex offenders and trans people in the same sentence, loads of people's brains just shut off and go into autopilot and start going, oh, yeah, you know, trans people are sex offenders, oh, trans people are sex offenders, or just complete bullshit. There's no statistics here showing that in any country in the world ever who has allowed trans people to update their documents slightly easier than the UK, which is most of them where you can do it. None of them show that there's anything to do with sex offenders, no increase in sex offences or people getting away with sex offences, or people in prison suddenly being empowered to hurt their other inmates. It just makes no sense at all. Anyway, looking back, the deep regret that I have is that we actually didn't push harder on the amendments that we had as the conditions for supporting the bill. As they say, he didn't offer any. And we took at face value the Scottish Government on the record. They said that nothing in the legislation would negatively interact with the Equality Act. Which it doesn't. That's just factually true. And he also, here we go. He also pledged support for Nurse Sandy Peggy, this one, who has been harassing Dr. Beth Upton and caused a big scene because she had to exist alongside a trans person. There's a couple of videos on my channel about that already. If you would like a summary, you can go check it out. But this is just the current gender critical thing. It's a cis woman who is an anti-trans activist who doesn't think trans people should be able to use the facilities at work. And of course now the Scottish Labour leader is supporting her. So he is just out and out gender critical, anti-trans campaigner who wants to remove rights from trans people. This doctor who has never done anything wrong. She's literally just done her job. She's just a doctor and she's been raked through the media over nothing. And now the fucking leader of the Scottish Labour Party is taking the side of someone who admitted to harassing her colleague. It's just disgusting how little support we have in the UK from politicians and from the media Like, they do not give a fuck. It's like if you went into work and you harassed your colleague because they were from another country or gay or something, you might get away with it because racism and homophobia definitely exist in this country. You might not. But what you are very unlikely to do is to get the leader of the fucking Scottish Labour Party backing you up after you admitted in court that that's what you had done. Like, these people, like, he doesn't even think that trans people are fucking human. Like, it's just disgusting. Anyway, there's a summary on that here. So then he said, this isn't about a government issuing guidance and then a health board choosing to follow the guidance or not follow the guidance or interpret the guidance. This is about following the law, the actual law, and the Equality Act is very clear. It is. And the Scottish NHS has been following it, as has loads of other organisations in the country. So this actually undermines the argument, which is around how do we challenge transphobia and how do we make sure we're also challenging misogyny and sexism at the same time? Yeah, they're not in conflict in the slightest. That isn't what's going on here at all. What's going on here is someone being transphobic, you blindly defending them, you saying that trans people shouldn't be able to update their legal documents in a sensible way at all, and then not giving any reason for it at all, and then lying about the Equality Act. He then says, because there's a failure to respect the equality. What are you talking about? In the Equality Act, it explicitly says that trans people are allowed to use the facilities of their actual sex. There is no robust action from the government who are actually notified about this and didn't take meaningful... What kind of meaningful action? Do you want the government to ban trans people from using the toilet at work? Is that what you're calling for? Yeah, I mean, that is the only possible thing you can be calling for here. If we are going to stop falling into divisive culture war politics, like... What are you... unbelievable. Like, this is literally all you're doing, mate, you stupid fucking prick. Just unbelievable. This is literally it. You're picking the fucking gender critical shredding a trans person flavour of the month, blindly defending them, saying, I oppose reforming the Gender Recognition Act for literally no reason at all. I mean, that's what culture war politics, that's what it is. That is literally all it is. If we're going to make sure we're making progress as a nation, and we've got to say quite clearly, we support single-sex spaces based on biological sex. Yeah, so we respect the Equality Act. So just, again, to be clear, the Equality Act explicitly protects trans people with or without a gender recognition certificate to use the correct spaces. Like, that is literally in the Equality Act. They would have to change the Equality Act to remove that part. So this guy, leader of the Scottish Labour Party, is straight up lying about what the Equality Act says. Like, just factually wrong. And then he is, again, straight up calling for the gender critical dog whistle, barely even a dog whistle at this point, saying we support single-sex spaces based on biological sex. What he means is sex at birth, and what he means is trans people shouldn't be able to use the toilet at work. Like, that is what he is calling for. The leader of the Labour Party in Scotland. It's just so extreme. This is a situation we've got to. Fortunately, I don't think the Labour Party are in power in Scotland at the moment. How are we going to find out? Seats, maybe? Oh, this is probably what we want. Yeah, whatever. Scottish Labour 22, Scottish National Party 62. Yeah, so they are the third biggest party. But obviously the Conservatives aren't going to be defending trans people's rights. And obviously Alba aren't either. They're the far right party in Scotland. The SNP has generally been positive for trans people, but it's pretty bleak. So if you're a trans person in Scotland, beware that the leader of the Labour Party there is gender critical and wants to change the Equality Act, is lying about the Equality Act, and wants to ban trans people from using the toilet, changing rooms, whatever, at work. Wants someone like me to not be allowed to go to the toilet. So he is a lying dickhead. In fact, you know what? Callback. If you're watching this as a clip, this is a callback to a previous video that you need to go and watch. But he is dishonest, dishonorable, undisciplined, immodest, and lacks integrity. So there you go. He can fuck off. So, someone here saying he was paying his workers below minimum wage. Talk about that. I don't know about that. So that may or may not be true. If you want to send me a link, maybe we can talk about it another time. I wouldn't be surprised. Like, I can't remember the exact wording of it, and it's a shame because it was a really good quote, but it's something like, someone's views on trans people is like the most reliable single revealer of their character. Usually when you see some, particularly when it's a cis man coming out against trans rights, and then you start digging, you find out that they're a trash person, and it's less likely to happen in left-wing parties or centrist parties like Labour, but it does happen, like Wes Streeting, for example. But usually they spiral into being a terrible person, or they already are, and it's the like tip of the iceberg, and it takes the rest of society and cis people like years to find out. But like with J.K. Rowling and like with just so many other people, they come out and then you're like, oh, turns out they're actually a horrible person all along. And we're like, we knew, because they fucking hate trans people. Someone here saying, no, I'm not going to read that out. Comorbid bigotries. Yeah, that's true. I think it's less. I think viewing various bigotries as their own forces is important, but viewing them as completely orthogonal is probably wrong. And what I mean by that is they're not like, if we have a bunch of people, it's not like separate properties. It's not like it's not just like items of clothing. Oh, this person has a red hat, this person has a red t-shirt, this person has a red skirt. Like I've got a red skirt on right now. It's more like this person is more likely to be bigoted and have bigoted thinking than this person. And that might come out that they're obsessed with trans people, and so transphobia is what they talk about most of the time. But when you already have these thought patterns of this group of people is less than me, this group of people is disgusting, we should be taking rights away from this group of people regardless of whether I have evidence to justify what I'm saying, this group of people is a danger to women and children. Like, when you've already got that way of thinking, you'll be much more likely to think the same things about another group of people. So, yeah, sorry, orthogonal is a maths word. I probably shouldn't say it. Orthogonal means like perpendicular. It's like when two things are like completely unrelated, and it's also a science word. Like, if you, I was trying to think of an example that's not terrible. I mean, like we were talking about earlier with sex characteristics. Sex characteristics aren't like entirely orthogonal, as in they don't affect each other and they're just completely unrelated properties. They're not just like mix and match, whatever. But also they're not all completely in line with each other. They're somewhere in between. So if you think about it, it's like, if you think about it in terms of lines, there's like parallel, and then there's like orthogonal, and then there's like in between those two things. And if something's like parallel, then it's correlated. It's like true 100% correlation. If this happens, then this always happens. And when something is orthogonal, it's like, if this happens, this other thing may or may not happen. Doesn't matter. They're completely unrelated. It's like, if it's raining and I go outside, I will get wet. If it's raining, I may or may not have a cup of tea. Like, they're just completely unrelated. If it's raining, it may or may not be Tuesday. Completely unrelated. But some things are like correlated, but not strictly. So like, if it's raining, I'll be more likely to take an umbrella, but I won't always take an umbrella. So it's not like 100% correlation, and it's not like totally orthogonal. I'm not just taking umbrellas out of the house randomly. I take the umbrella out when I think it is raining or when it's probably gonna rain. I know you should probably Google it, 'cause that's probably a terrible explanation, but I think orthogonal and correlation are good words. Good words to know. Anyway, last thing we're going to talk about. So, I just want to kind of float this idea. I've been discussing with some other trans people about this. So I said, quoting me, quote, when you think of a trans person who has good media skills, as in knows the arguments, good at getting the point across, knows how to talk to the media, able to tolerate the extreme abuse, isn't a sellout, who do you think of? Do you think you could and would do it? And we've got loads of responses here, which is great. I will go through them all. I haven't actually had much time to look yet. And so here's Mallory Moore here with 2 great examples, Sean Fay and Paris Lees. If you don't know who those 2 are, you should check them out. They are both great examples of the thing I'm talking about. I think we need more of these people, but I don't think that what we don't need is people who are like, oh, I can do that, who then just dive in and make a load of mistakes, say something stupid, get absolutely shredded, don't realize how bad the abuse is, crumble, and then that's it. We need people who fit the description of basically this, who you think, oh, this person should be good at this kind of thing. You know, they're able to do these things. And I'm not trying to be exclusionary with this on purpose. If you are someone who is not good at making clear arguments, that doesn't mean what you have to say is less valuable. It doesn't mean you're less valuable as a trans person. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean you shouldn't have as much rights. What it does mean is you are just not as good at going on the media as someone who is good at making good arguments. I mean, that's just a reality of life. And I think we need to find more people who are capable or would potentially be capable of this and are doing some kind of organizing with a group of people like that, so that we can have a more trained and more cohesive media strategy as a group. Like, I'm thinking particularly in the UK here. I think in the US they already have more of this. They have some organizations which have trained some trans people, like Chase Strangio and Erin Reed. There are some people who are like prominent, good at what they're doing. I don't. The UK. I mean, like an example here, Sean Fay and Paris Lees are both great examples of when I was first like coming out and doing trans activism stuff. They were in the media at the time. They were doing the things, and they both kind of took a step back. I'm not at all rating them here. Everything they've contributed is amazing. They're great people. I've talked to both of them, but when you are the only person doing it, and Munro is another example, when you're like one of the only people doing it, all of the fire is at you. It's too much. And when you do it long enough, you just like, I fucking hate this, and you don't want to do it anymore, and you burn out, and you do other things. Like, both of them have been writing books. There are other things you can do other than this. But I do think we need some kind of media force. I don't know what to call it. I mean, maybe we need what was it? Oh, we need a battalion of male to female transgenders within the media. No, or any other type of trans people, not just trans women. In fact, we need a range of people. It can't all just be copy and paste straight white trans women. But yeah, so I would be interested to hear what you have to say to this. Yeah, it shouldn't have a militaristic name. Yeah, battalion. I don't actually mean battalion. Like, just transmedia group or something. I don't want to create a new organization. when there are organizations already doing stuff. But at the same time, who in the media right now is doing this? If there are people that I'm unaware of, then I should be aware of them. And it would be great if you could let me know. If you know of anyone, please write it in the comments. I'm going to read through all of this Blue Sky post. I've got 77 responses so far. It'd be great if you could add yours. Even if you're just writing the same names again, if people keep popping up, then we know they're the people who people think of. But I don't think there should only be like 2 or 3 names. I think that we need a bigger group, and I think we should like organize something, learn some media training, talk with each other, organize stuff. When we're like, oh, you know, the BBC is sniffing around for someone to do a soundbite on Radio 2 this morning, it'd be great if we could be like, hey everyone, from the people here who are good at this and can tolerate the abuse and who know what's going on, and we've discussed who can take this on, so you don't always just feel like, oh god, it's got to be me again, or so you don't feel like you're on your own, and so we can discuss points together. And I would love to know what you think on this, and if you have any feedback. This is like community stuff, and if you're like, Katie, this is rubbish, someone's already talked about this, great, that's what I need to know, because I don't know what is going on other than stuff I've talked to people like privately, what's going on in this regard. So please let me know if you have any ideas. And I am kind of thinking UK focused, but if you know Americans, then at least they're worth talking to, or anyone from any other country. Sorry, I don't mean to only be talking like there's only 2 countries. The joys of the internet. But yeah, let me know. And yeah, that's all the things we have to talk about this week. I hope you're all doing okay. It's been a bit great. Is the BBC even trustworthy nowadays? Not when it comes to trans people, that is for sure. But yeah, I hope everyone's doing all right and isn't as stressed as me about the passports thing. Go and watch Hunter's video, because it might make you a bit more sane than watching my video. I'm not really this person saying here, you're not alone, but it's shite publicity. So when I'm thinking about this kind of stuff, I'm not thinking about it being personal publicity. Like, the only reason I've ever done media stuff before is because I think, I mean, maybe you disagree, in which case, great, tell me. But I think I'm reasonably good at it, and I think someone has to do it. And I don't want to lose human rights. Like, that's why I'm doing this. I'm doing YouTube. I do kind of enjoy doing YouTube. I certainly enjoy doing call-in shows. And I enjoy talking to chat, because you're all amazing. But I'm not like trying to be a celebrity. I fucking hate it when you sit down. Like, at the moment, I'm playing a lot of Pokemon cards. You sit down someone and they're like, "Oh, you're Casey Montgomery from the internet." I'm like, that's great. Like, and if you like my videos or whatever, that's cool. I really appreciate that. But I'd rather it's just like, "Oh, hi, nice to meet you." Like, we're friends for having the same hobby. Like, being famous is lame, and I'm not even that famous, so I'm sure it only gets a lot worse. But it's important, and like, if I can get more famous, then I can use that to fight for our rights better. So I don't know. I'm not interested in publicity for the sake of publicity. And I think if you're someone who is, and you want to like build a brand or whatever, then you're more prone to like selling out, or, I mean, that's what these right-wing grifters are, right? They're just people who care more about being famous than saying something true or rational or moral. So, I mean, they're 2 ends of the spectrum. And it's okay if you're like, I'm good at this, and also I quite enjoy it, and also I want this to be my career, but I do really care about trans rights. That's fine. That's probably better, because I don't want this to be my career. But if you're just like, oh, this is bad publicity, then go do something else, because publicity is a bad thing to chase, I think. Am I having a Thanos moment? I only know what Thanos is from memes. I think it's from like X-Men or something. I haven't seen whatever film it is. I don't like superheroes. But I think he's the guy with the big like purple chin or something. And I think he like snapped his fingers to destroy half of the people on Earth or something. That's all I know. I might be having that moment. If I get to choose exactly which half of people get destroyed to me, maybe I could be up for that. But yeah, Tranos. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but anyway, I'm tired. So we're going to end it here. Thank you very much, everyone. And we'll see you all next week. Oh, just got a last super chat here, 9.99 from Jeff, saying, "Do you think it would be more effective to have moderate voices from the trans rights side?" No, I think we should just say what's true. I don't. I mean, I don't think. I mean, maybe like it's just so ridiculous. I think my position isn't just. I think it's so moderate. Like, what do I want? I want trans people to have same access to healthcare as everyone else, and to be able to like have legal documents and be safe. It's just so mundane and like middle of the road. It's so. I mean, in most cases, we already have it in the UK. Most of the things that I want, we already have, and I just don't want them to be taken away. And we've had them for like decades. It's like I feel like almost like a sham when I'm talking to some of these other trans people who want to like destroy capitalism and stuff. Like, yeah, I'd love the world to be better, but I am focusing on trans people. So I mean, if you think I'm not moderate, then I personally, I mean, everyone thinks I'm moderate, but like, if you think we should have more moderate, I mean, what do you want? Do you want some trans people who are going up and saying, I think we should reform the Gender Recognition Act, and you have no evidence at all to oppose it, but I'm willing to compromise and maybe we just half reform. What do you want? Oh yeah, it's okay. Well, I tell you what, we'll compromise with the gender criticals. We'll just ban half of trans people from the toilet. Like, I mean, we just need people arguing for what's the correct position. I I think I'm way more moderate than most trans people would be. I mean, what does moderate even mean? Like, you go on and someone says like, "Oh, trans people should be eradicated," and you don't punch them in the face. I mean, that's moderate, isn't it? You're like, "Oh, well, you have no evidence to support this position. It's immoral. It's aligned with the Nazis." Like, that is a moderate response. I don't know. Anyway, I hope everyone's doing well, and we will see you next week, same time, 8 p.m. UK time, Wednesday. And have a good week until then. Stay safe.